Oh boy, new year, new story. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Chaotic Tavern. I'm your bartender, Dan, and I've got a story to share with you. There are just some stories that stick with you, you know? They get their hooks in you and they just don't let go. They stick with you for years to come, always at the back of your mind, always ready to be shared with someone. And for me, one of these stories is about a very special individual. This is the story of the neckbeardiest neckbeard to have ever graced the world with his presence. The cringiest cancer to ever blight a tabletop gaming group. This is not just a story though, no. It's a collection of stories titled The Ballad of Grimey, the man who killed 3 campaigns. This is a story I've read and listened to a few other YouTubers cover, and it was the story that first sparked my interest in RPG horror stories. If you haven't heard this story yet, buckle up, you're in for a treat. This story's got pretty much everything cursed that could ever happen at a table. Bullying, threats, being a disgusting creep, and even trying to destroy an actual marriage. Also, this is gonna be a long one. Grab a chair and some snacks, cause we're gonna be here a while. This story is titled The Ballad of Grimey, the man who killed 3 campaigns by Shark of the Streets. This is a re-upload of an old story, as I've gotten in touch with some of the other players and have improved my writing capabilities slightly. This is a tribute to the worst human being I have ever encountered in my long life of gaming. He checked all the boxes of being that guy, from metagaming to creepy roleplay to deliberately trying to end real-life relationships. In addition to weekly board game nights and running into this unpleasant person at comic shops and conventions, I played in 3 different campaigns with him, each of them ending when he did something so fucking atrocious that it instantly killed the game. Here are the key players in our tale of horror. Me, the new guy and unwilling punching bag of our antagonist. Bro, my friend who introduced me to our game group. Host, hosts the game nights, and Grimey, hosts high school/college friend and all-around piece of shit. Campaign 1, Dark Heresy. I had just graduated and found a job near my college's city. Most of my friends had left by then, but bro was still around and told me he was part of a game group. I hadn't touched a D20 in 4 years, but I was eager to get back in the game and meet some new friends while I was at it. So I asked bro if he could snag me an invitation. Bro comes through, and I get a text from host with an address and a weekly schedule. I show up next to session an hour early. Host told me that the group was in the middle of a Dark Heresy campaign, but the GM was willing to add 1 more person. I spent an hour with host going over the ins and outs of Dark Heresy, which is a gritty and violent investigation and combat-focused TTRPG set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. I didn't know much about Warhammer 40k, so I thought I should play a younger character to indicate their naivete in the world. I then asked for a rundown on the party composition. The entire party was playing a combat-heavy class except for 1, so I built my character around charisma and deception to balance the team. The party was also mostly male characters, so I made her female. And finally, the party was trying to escape from a prison planet. So my character was someone born on the prison planet and longed to see what lied outside the wall-laden planet. By the time I finished putting my character together, the rest of the players began to arrive. Grimey came last. I introduced myself to all the players and made sure to go out of my way to thank Grimey for letting me join mid-campaign. Grimey didn't seem to care too much, and I took that as a sign that he was probably stressed at the thought of incorporating a new character into his campaign. I got my sheet approved by him and did my best to be a support role in the party. I was nervous at the time, so I avoided the limelight, made sure not to interrupt another player when they were talking, and provided a gift in the form of unhealthy snacks. And then the game got underway. At first, I was enjoying the session. My character was terrible at combat, but she had great investigation skills and could deceive anyone like it was no one's business. Grimey would often hint plot hooks or clues to mysteries which I wrote down and then encouraged the group to go after. My character was meek but resourceful and generally liked among everyone. Everyone except Grimey. It happened slowly, so I did not catch it right away. In combat, enemies would prioritize me. Despite having 2 heavily armored characters standing around without cover firing rocket launchers, a ninja running into melee with a power sword, and an elite sniper in the back. If I did not spend my first round of combat jumping into cover, Grimey would always have several mooks target me. Sometimes enemies got the jump on us and I was taken out instantly, but always saved by one of my teammates. Then my deception tactics became more challenging. Grimey originally had me roll deception whenever I made a cover story, but soon I had to roll deception for every lie I told in that cover story, and one failed roll would ruin the entire attempt to solve things non-violently. Sometimes I'd fail even when passing all my rolls. At one point, I dressed up like a scientist and secretly led the party through a bunch of laboratories, distracting guards and unlocking doors as I went ahead of them. One of our frontline heavies sees a dangerous-looking guard and tries to one-shot him before he's aware of the party's presence. The shot misses, but alerts every guard in the room, and they all open fire on me. According to Grimey, the guards assumed that I was with the band of heavily armored mercs despite me being in disguise and being across the room from them. So I went down again, my party finishes the fight, and I am brought to the medbay where at this point I was just a regular customer. Okay, so this is the portion of the story where I jump in and say, why? Why, Grimey? Why? Why would you do any of that? I understand not liking somebody and not going out of your way to be nice to them. I don't take any issue with that. But Grimey here is just full-on malicious. There's hate in this man's heart, and it is just fighting and thrashing to get loose. It's like an obstruction in his colon that's going to rip itself free one way or another just to solely mistreat others. I have no trouble believing this is actually what happened because, unfortunately, I know someone identical to Grimey. Almost one-to-one the exact same person. And I'm not alone. Nearly every person I know who has been around the RPG scene knows or has heard of their very own Grimey. Like some factory out there just keeps pumping them out and distributing them anywhere that people might accidentally have fun. And there's so much to this story that I've never understood. Grimey clearly hates OP to some extent, but he won't kick him from the table or even confront him to have a talk about their grievances. Instead, he's totally content to just keep him around and make his game hell. I don't know if Grimey is one of those people who get their jollies off having power over other people, but that's the read I'm getting. This man is a borderline stranger to OP, and he's already committed to being his #1 hater. If OP has no haters, Grimey is dead. And for those who haven't read this story, it gets worse. It gets so much worse. Another fun story was when our party had to investigate a merchant who may have been selling heretical items. I disguised myself as a noble, used my connections to get fake IDs, and spread rumors that a noble was looking to purchase goods on the black market and show up with one of the other PCs as my hired muscle. Grimey says that my muscle is too suspicious and forces me to roll a very challenging persuasion roll to let my muscle in with me. Miraculously, I make it, but Grimey was huffed about it, saying that the merchant's guards are on high alert and will shoot me if either I or my muscle do anything suspicious. A few more deception rolls and the merchant reveals a necklace which he claims is an unholy artifact. I ask him how can he prove that the item is an unholy artifact, and the merchant puts the necklace on my character. No rolls, no role-playing, no way to avoid this. I tell Grimey that there is no way my character would ever let someone put a cursed item anywhere near her. And Grimey just cackles and says, "You wanted to know if the necklace was unholy." My character suffers a permanent debuff. No way to remove it. I was pissed. I never knew why Grimey hated my character so much, though I later realized it wasn't my character he hated, but the player. He would talk over me when we were hanging out outside the game, criticize my taste in comics, movies, or TV shows, and would usually dismiss any points I'd make while having a conversation. All of this eventually boiled into the one act that completely destroyed his campaign. A mob boss had been connected to recent cult activity, and we had been given permission to bring him in. Problem was that he never left his well-guarded mansion and did not invite strangers. Me and our sniper had the highest stealth stats, so we paired up to explore the enemy grounds in order to scout for possible entry methods. Grimey had us roll stealth every single time we did anything. Walk down a hallway, roll stealth. Peek around the corner, roll stealth. Whisper to your party member an inch from your face, roll stealth. Grimey got more impatient with every successful roll we made, but our luck eventually ran out and one of us failed our stealth roll. Every guard instantly surrounds us, and they just materialized behind every corner, popped out of every door. Grimey made it pretty evident that me and the sniper were dead if we so much as blinked. I thought, okay, so now the party gets to plan a daring rescue. That's cool. But I was wrong. So very wrong. First, Sniper got interrogated. Grimey would scream questions at Sniper Player, and Sniper Player rolled to resist blurting information. At one point, Grimey had a guard throw a punch at Sniper, dealing a bit of damage. Overall, I thought it was dark, but fitting to Dark Heresy. Then came my turn, and here's where things got messed up. Grimey decided that regular interrogation was too good for my character. So, there's a whole paragraph I'm cutting out of this story. The link is in the description if you want to go check it out, but I will not be reciting it here. The TLDR is Grimey had OP's female character tied up and at the mercy of Grimey's NPCs. I'll let you solve that particular riddle. What Grimey did is hands down the most abhorrent thing you can make your players roleplay. Not only is it absolutely disgusting, but it's also needless. There's no reason for what occurred here. Grimey's actions are exclusively fueled by a need to get at someone through their character, and he clearly does not care how many people have to sit there and watch. These are not the actions of someone who is a little socially awkward. Sociopaths behave better than this. Sociopaths have to pretend that they're normal. This was just needlessly repugnant behavior from a guy who only wanted to make things unpleasant for one person at his table. No prize, no greater reward, no incentive other than screw OP. A pro tip for those listening at home, do not do this at your table. Ever. And if someone else does, do not let that go on without speaking about it. Freaks like Grimey thrive in these spaces where people are too awkward or too timid to call out other people when they act this way. And the only known cure for this blight is for someone to say absolutely not. Anyway, back to the story. Our only female player gets out of her seat, packs her things, and leaves without saying a word. She never plays a game with Grimey again. I'm in utter shock, as were most of the other players. No one said good game. No one even wanted to acknowledge that we'd have a session next week. The only person who looked like they were having a good time was Grimey, who was nudging Host while shoveling his books into his backpack, saying, "Nice finisher, right? Really sets up the dystopian feel of 40K. Host just kind of blankly agrees, not wanting to say anything. I show up to Host's next week and we're all playing board games instead. No one wants to play Dark Heresy anymore. Host says that he has a campaign in mind and wants me to come. I think, thank God. As long as Grimey isn't the GM, I'm safe. I was so very wrong. Awesome! One act of the way through this wonderful trilogy. Grimey, listen, I don't know you, but I need you to know that I hate you. Like, not just as a person, but as a concept. The mere idea of your existence gives me intestinal distress. I'm assuming you're at least 21 years old. That means over the span of 21 years minimum, no one thought it prudent to sit you down and explain that you're kind of a terrible human being. People looked at you and said, I'm sure that's fine, and frankly, that's unfair to all of us and yourself. Mostly us though, because we have to witness the glory that is your vile existence. Anyway, on to part 2. Campaign 2, Deadlands. Folks tend to ask, why did you keep playing? Or, why didn't anyone kick out Grimey from the group? The answer is a bit tragic, and it's tied to Grimey and Host's relationship. Host was the only person in our group who had a home big enough to fit our group. And save for Grimey, the group itself was great. But Grimey and Host go way back. Host is a nice guy, but his self-esteem is shit, and tries to please everyone. Grimey naturally latched onto Host for years, bullying him into a subservient friendship position. Grimey convinced Host that he was the only true friend he'd ever have, and that meant Host included Grimey for all of his nerdy activities. A few weeks after the horrific Dark Heresy campaign ending, Host announced that he wanted to GM a Deadlands campaign. I'd never heard of Deadlands before, but Host described it as the supernatural TV show, but set in the Wild West. I was sold. Session 0 came in, and as per my normal character creation strategy, I asked what everyone was playing. Of course, Grimey had to keep his character secret, but everyone else casually mentioned that they were making gunslingers and melee-focused characters. So, I went for a spellcaster class, the Mad Scientist. I wanted to make a super quirky character and did so in spades by taking hindrances. Hindrances are like feats in D&D, except they're all universally bad. But taking hindrances allows you to take actual feats, or increase your base stats. I maxed out on my hindrances and used them to bump up my stats so that I was pretty good at everything, but amazing at my magic skills. This helped me deal with bullshit combat scenarios that frequently came up. We wrapped up Session 0 by going around the group, giving a quick summary of our characters. One guy was a zombie gunslinger, another was a shape-shifting Native American, one person was a Men in Black style secret agent. Cool stuff. Grimey, ironically, had the most interesting character. A rich heiress with high charisma who was a huckster. A spellcaster who uses gambling to cast spells. His character was motivated to track down her husband's killer. I called out to Grimey, complimenting his cool character, to which he huffed and said, "All of my characters are amazing. I don't have trouble making original OP characters like some people." Not sure if that jab had been directed at me, Host, or another player, but I let it slide. I introduced my Mad Scientist. As a fun backstory hook, I said my scientist introduces himself as a doctor, but in reality, he was a college dropout since he felt college was a waste of time. I figured this could be fun if he'd run into another mad scientist, or even former classmates of his. Session 1. All of us are in Connecticut, boarding a train to head out west for a science conference in San Francisco. Host sets up these scenarios where each of our characters bump into each other and get a chance to roleplay an introduction. Finally, the RP scene between me and Grimey came up. Host sets up the scene. Grimey, as you are waiting to board the train, one of the crew members runs up to you with a concern relating to your luggage. As he leads you to the luggage loading zone, he points out that your luggage is too bulky to load with the rest. OP, you see this happening as you are walking to the train. This is perfect, I think to myself. I have spells that could help move heavy objects. My scientist saunters to Grimey's heiress and the crew member. "Excuse me, madam, I couldn't help but overhear your dilemma. Could I be of assistance?" Grimey got really pissy, turning to me and then immediately back to Host. "I don't know who this riffraff is, but I don't want him anywhere near my things. In fact, I want to buy his room on the train and use it for storage." Now, Grimey had taken 2 feats for his character, wealth and charisma. Both meant he could win just about any social situation, and the crew member said, "Let me speak to my boss." My scientist awkwardly introduces himself and tries to convince Grimey that I could solve the luggage issue. As if. You don't even look like a doctor. You look like a charlatan. I have my eye on you. At this point, Grimey writes some notes down and passes them to Host. Host reads them, looks concerned at Grimey, then shrugs and says, "Okay." The crewman returns with a supervisor, and the supervisor agrees to let Grimey have my character's room for storage. The supervisor then turns to my character, apologizes, and hands me an upgrade to a personal suite on the train. Grimey is not happy to hear this. "What the fuck, Host? How come OP gets a free suite?" Host tells Grimey that people cannot just spend money to kick someone out of a train, and upgrading passengers that are being inconvenienced is normal. Grimey continued to yell at Host, demanding that my character not be allowed to go on the train, suggesting that I shouldn't even be allowed to play in this campaign. Host sheepishly stands his ground, not out of moral justification, but out of no way to approve Grimey's demands without sounding like a complete lunatic. Grimey was so out of shape that even an argument caused him to sweat. After finally catching his breath, he calmed down and his character decides to offer mine a peace offering. An apple. My character thanks Grimey and then tosses the apple behind his head. Grimey started breathing deep again. He took a massive inhale and then screamed, "You metagaming piece of shit!" Everyone at the table jumped back when he said that. Grimey began ranting at me that there was no way my character would know that Grimey had drugged the apples. "Wait, hold on," was the entire table's reaction. Grimey showed Host his character sheet and said that his heiress always carried drugged apples as part of her backstory, and the only way OP's character would know was if he was metagaming. Now, I had not known about Grimey's poison apples, but I handed Host my own character sheet and pointed at a section of the sheet where players can input personality qualities. One such quality was irrational fears, and I had listed apples as a fear. I said that my character thought there was a special meaning to the phrase "an apple a day keeps the doctor away," and therefore distrusted all apples. The group got a chuckle out of my explanation, and Grimey relented his point. No apologies, just a grumpy acknowledgement that we can now proceed to the actual story. The best part of the setup for all of this is the fact that Grimey here has no reason in character or out of character to really do any of this. This is like the reversed version of that one player at the D&D table who his character just won't join the party for some reason. Like he wants the party to beg, scream, cry, and kick until eventually his character might decide to join the group. Maybe. This is just the inverted version of that. Instead of being an obstinate prick who won't ride along, he's trying to weed someone else out at the start of things. Also, quick side tangent. Deadlands, fantastic setting. Love it. Love it to death. Not crazy about the rules. I'm not a big Savage Worlds player, but Deadlands as a setting is fantastic. I'd highly recommend you check it out. Grimey made sure to make my gameplay experience as miserable as possible. To start, that note he passed to GM was that Grimey wanted to hire a private investigator to do a background check on my scientist. Grimey had no reason to other than he wanted an in-game justification for why his heiress knows my scientist's backstory. What was supposed to be a fun side plot hook became a reason for Grimey to ridicule me during every RP session. I'd be blending in with other scientists, trying to RP some info out of them, and here comes Grimey loudly proclaiming that my scientist was a fraud, that he was a college dropout. I'd make up credentials to get our party into a lab, and Grimey shoves me to the side and tells the guards how I'm not supposed to be there, because her private eye dug up the truth about me. Every time I tried to roleplay, Grimey would interrupt the scene, acting smug and obnoxiously divulging my character's backstory. Combat was arguably worse. My mad scientist was mostly a support caster, but Grimey went full-on damage dealer, focusing on area of effect spells. Grimey would always cast spells in such a way that they would always catch my scientist in the crossfire. Grimey would sometimes move his heiress specifically so that her attack would hit me as well. Fortunately, I was a smart player. I had a lot of defensive spells, and my chunkier base stats allowed me to tank Grimey's bullshit. Host also took note and made sure that enemies didn't target me since I was already battling Grimey. Whenever it was an enemy's turn, Grimey would remind Host that OP hasn't been attacked in a while. And Host would nervously point out that my scientist hadn't attacked the bad guys, only provided buffs for my allies. This broke out into an argument at every combat encounter. Things came to an ugly head during our first major boss battle. Grimey killed a rogue mad scientist, which caused his latest creation, a 12-foot-tall steampunk mech, to come alive. Grimey goes up to the mech and rolls persuasion to convince the mech that OP killed his master. Grimey rolled really well, but Host said it's a robot. It only does what it's programmed to do. And it's programmed to rampage. Grimey got so pissed off that he refused to help in this battle, spending each of his actions trying to persuade the robot to kill my character or badmouth the other players for teaming up with an evil mad scientist such as myself. Our party manages to defeat the mech without Grimey's help, but the mech is now set to self-destruct. And we have X turns to get far enough away from it before it explodes. Host sets up a riveting chase sequence in which we have to escape from the laboratory labyrinth, getting past robotic guards and locked doors. Grimey decides that it would be a good use of his time to stand behind every locked door and slam it in my face if I tried to go through, locking it behind him. As a mad scientist, dismantling the locks on a door isn't that difficult, but it eats up time. But I had something else Grimey didn't have. A friend. Bro was sick and tired of Grimey's bullshit, and followed Grimey everywhere his heiress went. Every time Grimey tried to delay my character, Bro's 6-foot-tall Native American would drag her away, giving me plenty of time to escape. Unsurprisingly, Grimey was not happy that my scientist survived the boss fight and the explosion. At which point, his character proclaims, "I am going to continue my quest for my husband's killer by heading east." Now, Host had done a pretty solid job at defining everyone's plot hooks being in the west, literally railroading us by taking a train heading west. But like a stuck-up brat, Grimey wanted to travel east. Host then described how an eerie man in black manifests in front of him, tells Grimey that he killed the husband, and that man in black will wait for Grimey in San Francisco before mysteriously vanishing in black smoke. Even with this Deus Ex Machina, Grimey whined that he wanted to go back east and refused to travel with these lunatics. Out of character, Grimey also berated Host, demanding that everyone else make new characters to fit his character's insane plot twist. We had been playing this campaign for months, and you could see that after each session, Host's passion had slowly been drained. This was the last straw. All of his story threads for our characters, all of the plot development, none of it mattered to him anymore. He just shut his books and said, "That boss fight is probably as good as it'll get. Let's play something else." It was heartbreaking. The next few weeks were spent playing board games. During one such day, Bro gets me alone and says he wants to run his own campaign. I ask if Grimey was invited, and Bro said that he talked to Host, and where Host plays, Grimey plays. I shuddered, but Bro put his hand on my shoulder and told me, "I got you." Bro had his work cut out for him, but he definitely gave Grimey a taste of his own medicine. TLDR, player uses meta-knowledge to ruin role-playing sessions, explicitly tries to drug and kill OP for no in-game reason, and eventually tries to derail the plot so hard that the GM quits. I'm I'm genuinely at a loss for words right now. I'm legitimately appalled. Grimey, my dude, my homie, my friend, how many SSRIs are you on, and can you drastically increase that amount? Because whatever's going on in that head of yours is about as broken as my parents' hopes and dreams. How bad at life do you have to be to think about doing this sort of thing? Really consider it and then go, yeah, absolutely, that's the choice I'll be making. That's the course of action for me. Jesus Christ. I've mentioned in this story that I know my very own personal Grimey, and let me tell you, it is astonishing how similar these two are. We had a player at my table who would actively hide important information from the party. Why? Because he wanted to. Because it's what his character would do. He'd find weapons that were upgrades for other party members that were specifically intended to go to those other party members and hoard them. He'd hoard them and sell them. It got so bad trying to play with this guy that eventually we just switched schedules and nobody told him. We just said the campaigns that we were running were over and then we just kept meeting. Is that the best way to deal with a problem like that? Not really, but to be fair, this was a person who hated pretty much everyone in our group, in character and out, so I don't really know why he was there. Well, other than to maybe get out of his basement, but that's just speculation. We got one more story, folks. One more chapter before I can put this baby to bed. This ugly, ugly, screaming baby. I bet by now my voice is probably trying to give out on me. Pass to Dan? Yeah, it is. Well, mama didn't raise no bitch. Just a disappointment. Interlude. This is a short story of Grimey's shittiness that is unrelated to his campaign serial killings. You can skip down to Campaign 3, A Song of Ice and Fire, if you just want the TTRPG horror. No, OP, no, I don't think I will. I think I want to hear this, and I think everyone at home needs to hear this. Over the past year in secret, Host had begun a long-distance relationship with a woman he met online. After the abrupt end of his campaign, he disappeared for a few weeks. We all thought it was due to him being depressed about his poor campaign, but when he returned, we were all surprised to find out that Host had gotten married and spent the last few weeks having his new wife move in. Host wife was not a nerd, but she did wonders for our weekly group sessions. Host's house became spotless. Host began organizing his games, comics, and other nerdy gear, and we always had freshly made and healthy snacks for our game nights. Host wife also put a stop to Host's poor eating habits, and the switch from daily junk food to home-cooked meals showed. Host looked healthier, thinner, and most importantly, happy. So of course, Grimey didn't want any of this. Grimey told the group when Host wasn't around how much he hated Hostwife. He said Hostwife was rude to everyone, disrespected us with healthy snacks, and was changing Host into something he's not. Most of the group ignored Grimey, with the others reaffirming that Hostwife was only rude to Grimey because Grimey was rude to her. Grimey doesn't need to eat the healthy snacks, and Host is in the best shape of his life and the happiest he's ever been. Grimey would always raise his voice when he pointed out the flaws in his argument until it would attract the attention of Host or Hostwife, at which point he'd shut up and murmur to himself. Grimey's next plan was to attack Host's newly acquired self-confidence. I came early one game night and found Grimey huddled up next to Host, telling him to divorce his wife. It was like some bad sitcom. She's taking away your freedom. She doesn't understand you. She's using you for your house and money, despite her making more money. Maybe it was the years of abuse finally hitting Host, or maybe it was the Deadlands campaign that was the last straw, or maybe Hostwife was just that good for his mentality. But Host, in the first time since I've known him, stood up to Grimey and told him to leave his wife alone. Times were a-changin', and this was the first step to the end of Grimey's reign. Campaign 3, A Song of Ice and Fire. Bro had gotten bit by the Game of Thrones bug hard, and he lost it when he learned there was a Song of Ice and Fire TTRPG. He gave me a quick rundown, and I was particularly intrigued by two aspects of the system that are important to the story. First, there were two forms of combat. a traditional combat system in which you fought with weapons until a side was defeated, and a social combat in which you present arguments using social stats to sway NPCs to your way of thinking. Second, this was a setting with virtually no magic, and serious injuries could take months of in-game time to heal. The pacing of the game was supposed to be a mix of political intrigue and combat, making it one of the more unique systems I'd ever run across. As per my normal character creation habit, I asked our players what types of builds they were making. Grimey, as before, refused to divulge anything about his character, but everyone else was running either a pure combat or combat/social hybrid character. I rolled up a Meister, which for those unaware is a scholar, considered highly prized in any kingdom for their wealth of information. I focused on healing knowledge, which allowed me to reduce in-game healing times by more than half, and I put all of my remaining points in social encounters, as I felt a scholar would be out of place on the battlefield. Grimey, once Session 1 began, revealed a pure combat archer with a 10-page backstory. Bro, having seen Grimey's bullshit before, read over the entire backstory, which Grimey refused to show until Session 1. Bro flat out refused, stating that no, you cannot be the head of the army and have the loyalty of the Lord's military over the Lord himself. Grimey had become more agitated since Host got married, and showed that agitation by slamming his ham-sized fists into the wooden table in hopes of appearing more threatening. Bro treated Grimey as the child he was and told him he could be a sergeant in arms and have a small platoon of soldiers. Grimey continued pounding on the table, but Bro's ruling was final, and he relented. The session finally began, and Bro laid out our first mission. A neighboring baron and ally to our lord had been suffering from bandits hiding in their forests, preventing merchants and traders from getting through and slowly dwindling their supplies. It was left to our group on how we could aid the baron. I suggested sending supplies to the baron, but accompany it by some soldiers disguised as traders. If the supplies were ambushed by bandits, then we'd be able to counter-ambush them. The party was in agreement, but Grimey didn't like the plan. Mostly because he didn't come up with it. Grimey wanted to go to our neighboring allies and burn their forest down to flush out the bandits, then bring the full force of our military against them. While this plan seemed insane, Bro thought this would be an excellent time to test out the social combat system. Our lord requested me and Grimey's presence in his throne room, each of us standing before him to present our arguments. Grimey goes first, preaching that might is right and force yields results. My Meister presented the facts, that burning an ally's forest while marching in with the full force of our military might be seen as an act of aggression that would also leave our own castle vulnerable. With my focus in social combat, I easily outrolled Grimey's argument, which led to Grimey declaring to Bro, "I challenge OP to one-on-one combat." And before Bro could say anything, Grimey described charging at my character with a short sword and skewering him. Grimey rolls his dice and says, "I hit and you take 11 damage." Bro shuts Grimey down, saying that before any of that happens, 2 of the Lord's guards tackle Grimey to the ground. Grimey slammed his fists into the table again, screeching how his dice rolls were high. Bro facepalms and informs Grimey, "You were called to the Lord for a discussion. You took out your weapon in front of the Lord, which is already grounds for being attacked, and then you unprovokingly charged at his Meister. The Lord now has no reason to believe your plan could succeed now, and you will be stripped of your rank if you continue this behavior." Bro was cool like that. Grimey was so pissed that he declared that we were done for tonight, packed his things, and left. After he was gone, Bro told everyone that he was still down to run the session, and we did some RPing and finalized our mission plans. Session 2 rolled around. Grimey was furious that the group had the audacity to play without him after he left and refused to listen to our plan. We had 2 carts full of supplies and an armed platoon disguised as merchants, including Grimey's fellow soldiers. Grimey refused to dress up as a merchant and ordered his soldiers to do the same. As we head off, Bro explained that our group will need a scout to plan their route and avoid ambushes. Grimey volunteered, and the group agreed as his scouting stats were high. Grimey manages to do a decent job, rerouting our carts away from damaged roads and bad weather. Then Grimey found the first bandit, hiding as a lookout. When he came back to report to the group, he didn't mention it. Out of character, everyone was asking why Grimey wasn't warning about the bandit, and Grimey smugly exclaims, "It's what my character would do. And don't you think about metagaming this." Our group is inevitably ambushed, but we managed to drive the bandits back. Most of the group took damage as they fought, but me, being a non-combat role, I hid under the cart. This pissed off Grimey, who was berating my Meister for being a coward as I was patching up our party and NPCs post-battle. When I offered to assist Grimey, who'd taken some damage, he called me a fake Meister and said he could bandage himself off better than any quack could. Grimey failed his medicine check and now suffered a movement speed penalty until he got proper medical treatment. One of our NPCs volunteered to help Grimey with his scouting, saying that 2 scouts would be more likely to find a hidden ambush. But Grimey huffed, telling Bro to not do his job. Grimey continued to solo scout, but I asked the NPC scout to go ahead and scout anyways. Grimey yelled at Bro, telling him that he had no point in the group now, which Bro responded with, "Maybe if you did your job and warned people of ambushes, your reputation among the NPCs would be stronger." Grimey slammed the table again, but Bro simply stared Grimey down like a parent who was about to spank their child. Eventually, our NPC scout reported a larger group of bandits readying to ambush us. Host orders our stealthiest NPCs and PCs to sneak past the bandits and hide. When the bandits would attack, they'd ambush the bandits and pincer them from behind. A solid plan. Grimey was part of the stealth party and hid himself in a tree. Right as our party was getting into position, Grimey says he impersonates one of the bandits' voices and yells that there is a Meister in the back of the cart who'd be worth a king's ransom. This ruined our surprise round, which resulted in a bandit notching an arrow and firing first, into Grimey. Grimey turned red, cursing out Bro as a metagaming asshole playing favorites. Bro told Grimey that, "You can't pretend to be a bandit. You don't know what any of them sound like. All you did was give away your position. Now make a dex check to prevent yourself from falling out of a tree." Grimey rolled poorly, and the damage of falling out of a tree combined with his 2 other injuries made him unconscious. Grimey continued to smack the table with his fists, then declared he needed some fresh air and stepped outside to cool off. With Grimey out of the picture, the rest of the party had a challenging battle. Even my Meister had to draw a knife at some point when our back line was overwhelmed, resulting in me getting a gnarly stab wound. Grimey returned as we wrapped up the fight. One of the PCs searched the bodies and uncovered a coded message with the emblem of a neighboring country, giving us our first major story hook. I patched myself up and all the other injured PCs and NPCs as one of Grimey's soldiers dragged his unconscious body to me. Let it never be said that I metagame or hold a grudge. As I rushed over to Grimey's character knowing full well I could have ignored him, I patched him up, made some recovery drugs with wild plants, and got him conscious again. Grimey smiles and says he pulls out his dagger and stabs my character. Bro demands Grimey give a non-bullshit reason why he'd attack his own medic. Grimey argues that he was still in battle mode before falling out of the tree, and his soldier instincts would keep him in fight mode even as he was coming around. Bro glanced in my direction. I shrugged my shoulders, and Grimey was allowed to make his attack. It hits. And now the group's only medic is unconscious. Grimey glares at me with a shit-eating grin and then volunteers to scout ahead. This time, Grimey actually warns the group of ambushes, which we avoid. We reach our destination, the Baron's Castle. half the party, including Grimey, need extreme medical attention. We're put up in the Baron's private medical wing, where I eventually regain consciousness and begin patching myself up faster than the Baron's doctor and nurses could believe. Host had already convinced the Baron that we were here to help, and with a generous introduction, I was given temporary control over the Baron's medical staff. Before this exchange, Grimey had been a model patient, wanting to get back to full health as soon as possible. But when the news of my temporary promotion got to the medical wing, Grimey refused any further treatment. He lashed at the nurses, doctors, and anyone else working under a lying Meister who will betray the Baron. Grimey's low diplomacy scores meant that no one believed him, resulting in him getting out of bed and attacking my character whenever I tried to help him. That's when I get a clever idea and pass Bro a note. Bro looks at it, smiles, and continues roleplaying. Next time we went to Grimey's perspective, Bro describes a meal prepared for him, which Grimey then eats. Bro asks Grimey to make a constitution save, and being injured, Grimey gets massive penalties to the save, failing it. Your head feels heavy as the poppy hidden in your meal begins to numb your body and fill you with pleasant dreams. Yes, I had ordered the nurses to drug Grimey's food, as he was clearly delirious with fever. Grimey shrieked, giving us a poor Donkey Kong impersonation as he alternated slamming his left and right fists into the table. His hands were actually swollen by the end of this fit, which only pissed Grimey off more, because out of character, I offered to fetch him the first aid kit. In character, I rolled extremely well to heal Grimey up. Fast forward a few sessions, and our party is making progress piecing together a mystery regarding a rival lord who was seeking to cut off our lord's allies as part of a plan to take over our lands. Grimey had zero contribution to our progress as he couldn't leave his bed. Instead, Grimey began writing page-long notes and passing them to Bro. Bro read them all, and during one of our RP sessions, described this scene. As you're discussing your recent discovery, one of the nurses OP recognizes approaches him, asking for a private audience. The nurse explains that Grimey has been handing her letters in secret, demanding that they be sent to your lord without the party's knowledge. But due to his temperament, the nurse thought it would be best if OP saw them first. Bro passed me the notes, which were just pages of nonsense that can be summed up as, "Your Meister is drugging me as proof of his inevitable betrayal." I describe the Meister thanking the nurse, and when she leaves the room, I tear up the notes, which I then mimic in real life. And that was it, the straw that broke Grimey. The entire party was having a blast in Bro's campaign, half of which was just enjoying Grimey's freakouts. Grimey, in character, had lost all of his standing, losing the respect of his men and the favor of his lord for his out-of-character behavior. Bro, unlike any other GM, had given Grimey consequences for his actions. And Grimey couldn't compute. He tore up his character sheet and tossed it in Bro's face. He turned to Host and demanded to end this campaign, to which Host, having grown some form of a backbone, responded that it was Bro's decision when the campaign ended. Grimey would have screamed, but his voice had become a sore mess. He was sweating profusely, and his fists had become swollen and darker from pounding on the table. He sloppily threw all of his things into a bag, flipped me off, Host, and Bro, then slammed the door as he left. We were silent for a minute before Bro, with a look of satisfaction, said, "I'm ending the campaign here. I will never be able to top that climax." Epilogue. After that session ended, Grimey stopped coming to board game night and instead ran a new campaign, making sure to tell me in my face that I was not invited to play. I couldn't care less, and Host told me that said campaign only went for 3 sessions before Grimey got frustrated and stopped running it. I learned a month later that Grimey lost his job at a comic book shop. For years, Grimey had bragged that he was the superior nerd because he got employee discounts on comics and game books. I had visited that shop and it was actually pretty nice, but check on their Google and Yelp reviews and it was listed as a 2-star establishment with negative reviews from parents and women, mentioning one employee who was rude, insulting my tastes in comics or games, and demanding that I buy things based on his recommendation. After Grimey lost his job, he completely dropped from the friend group and even hosts stopped mentioning him. So that's the story of Grimey. He is the ultimate lesson in why shitty people sometimes get away with being shitty, but he's also the hope that karma does exist, and for that I will always thank Grimey for entering and leaving my life. TLDR. A player tries to break up our new friend's newlywed lifestyle, then metagames in a constant attempt to kill my character, which only backfires against him every time, leading to the biggest tantrum ever. So long, farewell, Avidazay, and goodbye, Grimey. Good God, to the Shadow Realm with your misbegotten and unwashed ass. As I said, this is genuinely my favorite story to come out of r/RPG horror stories, hands down. I absolutely love it, and I'm glad I took the time to read it here because it has everything. Grimey is the quintessential neckbeard we all think of whenever we wonder what playing competitive Magic is like. He's the thing I think of most whenever I hear someone say, "Oh boy, that guy is gonna be at the table tonight." He serves as an amazing example of what not to do in a group of friends. He's the embodiment of all things wrong with tabletop gaming, and I love him for it. Just, from really far away. OP, thank you for sharing this story. And to you, dear viewer, thank you for toughing it out and watching to this point. This was a long one, my god. Spoiler warning, the next one ain't gonna be real short either, but it's also gonna be a special one. A huge thanks to everyone for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw here, be sure to subscribe for more content. You can also find my main channel in the description. I'd also like to give an even bigger thanks to my supporters on Patreon. You guys are a massive help, and I can't show my appreciation for you enough. I'll see you all next time for another round in the Chaotic Tavern.